So I'm reading through this article and I love when people make predictions. But I also love to argue and I also love to have my own opinion. So here's my take on that article, on business, on the world after COVID, and also on a couple of things that you can do in those areas of venture.
I have a dream, that's all I need. I'll make it happen with some work and belief.
Risk management. Any list of R's should begin with risk. Identifying and managing risk becomes an industry after the financial crisis, when many major banks had no idea of their real liabilities. Global businesses have systems and procedures for addressing risk, but have they been sufficient to handle the global pandemic? A review is inevitable. And what about smaller and medium-sized businesses, whose lack of preparation has been exposed? Organizations, large and small, may need a fundamental shift in risk mindset. Expressed in supply chain management, for example, there will be a greater focus on just in case rather than just in time. In societal terms, the issue of climate change and sustainable development may come to occupy center stage. I have heard this so many times. We need a fundamental change. And you know what, I don't disagree with that, but I don't think the pandemic is the actual catalyst for doing that. After all, how many leaders do believe that we'll face another pandemic in the next 2 or 3 years? None, and neither do I. So what can we do? In terms of risk management, the one exercise that could help and that would have helped also during the global pandemic is a scenario analysis. You sit down with your senior leadership team and you come up with the core functions of your business, of the things that you need to protect, the things that are unique, the things that are most important. And you don't know what the next crisis will look like. But let me assure you, if you've gone through the process of a scenario analysis, when you've determined what your key products are, what your key processes are in your business, you will be very well equipped for the next crisis as well. Rewards. The crisis has highlighted issues of inequality and contribution. Those at the front line of vital services have made a major contribution, yet they are typically amongst the least paid, the least rewarded employees. And many will lose their jobs in the inevitable explosion of unemployment that follows the shutdown. As businesses and economies gradually recover, expect a discussion about the distribution of rewards, such as high levels of executive pay and the extent to which the inequalities that have grown between those at the top and those at the bottom are either sustainable or justified. Modern capitalism is much more unequal than, say, 1950s America. Seriously? Once again, as a human, I cannot disagree with that. We do see inequality. But as a business leader, I have to recognize the fundamental truths of compensation. And compensation is a direct factor of how many and how big a problem I can solve, and also how many other people there are that can solve the same amount of problems. What we can do, however, is enable more people to be in this fortunate position, to become a problem solver. That is the right place to start. Regulation. It seems unlikely that issues around risk and reward can be satisfactorily addressed without adjusting regulation and governance. Worker directives, for example, may be an idea whose time has finally come. Regulatory issues will form part of a broader discussion concerning the relationships between business and society. With an extraordinary 27 million UK citizens reliant on state support as of last month, how could it be otherwise? Well, actually this one I agree with. We've always seen that regulation is something that comes in first after any sort of crisis. And we've also seen that there are good ways to deal with that. They have improved society, they have improved business, they have improved companies. So as a business leader, your opportunity lies in staying ahead of this regulatory change. And as always, if there is something new, it is also an opportunity to outgrow or outsmart your competition. Rationale. It has become fashionable for organizations to obsess about their purpose. We don't expect this to disappear anytime soon. In fact, we think the discussion will intensify and deepen. We may question not just purpose, but necessity. For example, we might ask how far airport expansion and motorway development is really what we need. And though we might all agree that a robust health and care service is essential, will it be structured in the way that it is today? Now, this is another one that I agree with. Now, I do believe, and if you've seen some of the content here on this channel before, that we all need to live towards a purpose. It makes us more productive, it makes us more fulfilled, it makes us more happy. I do agree that in the future, many more employers and many more employees will look at their purpose, will look at the necessity of certain things, and will make a decision of what is essential for them in the future and what is not. So I'm sure we will talk a lot more about purpose in the future here also on this channel, as we have been in the past. Relationships. The crisis has us talking about the value of relationships in our communities, our networks, our neighborhoods. Organizations are held together in differing combinations by both societability and solidarity. We have missed face-to-face sociability during the lockdown, but arguably societal solidarity has been strengthened by the shared virus threat. In a potentially more remote post-pandemic world, with less of a sense of imminent shared threat, how can we build resilient communities at and beyond work? Honestly, I'm not entirely sure where to go on this one. What we have temporarily seen is just an extension of a trend that was already there. The question is valid, but maybe the pandemic can give us a good example of how it'll look in an extreme scenario, where everybody has to work from home, where everybody is remote. And maybe it can give us an idea of what to do and what not to do. Rebuilding. Economies all over the world will require major rebuilding. If we do not do this, billions of people's lives will be forever damaged. But rebuilding is a long-term task, if we are lucky, a 10-year haul, and yet our organizations, especially publicly quoted companies, are often trapped in a vicious cycle of short-termism. The injunction is, let us make the quarterly numbers look good. And in stark contrast, in the new world, organizations, managers and leaders will need to take a much longer time perspective. They will need to rethink how they really measure value and who their real stakeholders are. We will come to value people who get things done, competence over charisma. First of all, I agree that rebuilding is necessary, of course. What I disagree with is the time frame that the author speaks about here. He talks about a 10-year haul, and maybe that would have been true in the past. But I want to think that in a lot of things that we see today, we are far more short-term driven. Yes, the author here speaks about short-termism of companies, but the very fact is, you look into social networks and you have TikTok where your videos are 10 or 15 seconds long and not 10 or 20 minutes long like they are on YouTube. and we see a quicker and quicker development of certain events. We have seen a major drop in stock markets. They went down 30 or 40%, but they also went up 30 or 40% in the recent weeks. And all of this is an indication that our life will continue to evolve in a faster and faster pace. And for that reason, I think that time frame of 10 years of rebuilding is far too conservative, and we will probably see a much quicker recovery. Radicalization. The pandemic offers the opportunity for radical change. However, it is worth recognizing that after the financial crash of 2008, many predicted that the domination of financial capitalism was over. 12 years later, many of the same financial institutions are still in place. And from a UK perspective, it is true that in the immediate post-war period, we created the National Health Service. Many of the elements of the welfare state and at least aspired to higher levels of social mobility. Post-COVID organizations may need to embrace radicalism in ways that seemed inconceivable even 20 years ago. Perhaps business schools have a role to play here. They have in the main be repositories of techniques about business, finance, strategy, marketing. In the new world, they will have to embrace societal, cultural and ethical issues and put them at the center of their curricula. Not as interesting peripheral subjects for a minority, but as centerpiece subjects. I'm a big proponent of change when it comes to our educational system. Let's get real. When one of us don't know the answer to a question, well, we go on Google, or we go on YouTube, or we type it into Wikipedia. And we don't go and dig out our old school books because they are no longer relevant. So schools and universities do need to change. They need to start conveying more timeless information, more focused on the frameworks, on the logical reasoning, and identifying our strengths as well as recognizing our weaknesses. Beyond that, the educational system in itself will probably more rely on specialism. And that can happen in schools, but it is more likely to happen on the job or online. Real leaders. We have been slightly obsessed with leaders in organizations for quite a long time. The business sections of bookshops are stuffed full with accounts of the life and times of heroic CEOs. The pandemic has taught us that truly great organizations have leaders all over the place. Of course, in hospital wards, but also in horribly under-resourced care homes, in local authorities, ensuring that our rubbish is collected, in supermarkets, making sure that we can still feed ourselves. Maybe now we will fully understand that leadership is essentially a non-hierarchical concept. Yes, I said this here. Enough said. Thank you very much for watching till the end. Of course, if you enjoy this type of content, subscribe to the channel right now so you won't miss any valuable content in the future. My vision remains to bring leadership advice, business skills, and thoughts around freedom of life to every visionary, and you can support that as well if you hit the like button. That sends a strong signal to YouTube to show this video and others like this to people like you and I. Following on from the last point of the article about real leaders, watch the video that's on the screen right now. It'll give you a little bit more context, a little bit more information. I will see you over there and in the next video.